So what's good for businesses is the fact that we have these disasters hit, and it reminds everybody why you've been pushing
Yep.
disaster recovery strategy. And
It works
so,
out pretty good because I mean you can it defines expectations. How much do you want to spend on disaster recovery or business continuity? And you can put it in some very relatable terms. Do you want to be able to survive the Arctic blast of 2021? Do you need 7 days of on-site generating power? you know um, yes or no. I mean, and so it works out really good. I like it because it does allow you to meet expectations. I've had a couple of instances where I ran really large battery systems, and we had some expectations in one unit we were running. It was a very large data center, and our expectation was 6 hours of runtime on battery. And something would happen, and we'd prove that out, and along come hour five, and we're shutting everything down in those outages. And another one, we were 3 hours of runtime just on battery. Um, and that other one we added generator after the fact. But all these instances were great opportunities to set expectations with the client, because my wife asked, I've been in a 40 plus hour outage until just recently. And so it came up, I don't know, about halfway through. My wife said, well, isn't your computer up and running? I was like, no. She says, don't you have a battery backup on that? I was like,
even
yeah,
if you do,
that was good for an hour. That was good for maybe an hour.
yeah.
Uh, setting expectations. This is a great opportunity to set a baseline and a real good way to set expectations with your clients.
Yeah, and backup power has got a lot of math involved to it. So, it's not as simple as just getting a battery backup and throwing it on your PC. It's quite a bit more complex, and especially those of you who've worked in data centers, you know, I mean, how many watts do you need? How many amps do you need? How many watt hours are you looking at it at the current generation and the batteries? And so, there's a decent amount of planning that goes into this stuff.
Yep.
And you just, people think, oh, well, I have battery backups on my computer. Okay, well, where's your battery backup on your switches?
Yep.
Okay, well, that battery backup on your switches doesn't not mean jack if you have no connection to the internet,
So
and depending on your business model.
yep. In the infrastructure, in the HIT infrastructure assessment, there is a section there about UPSs. There is another section in there about UPSs on your internet connection, or I think I call it customer premise equipment, CPE. And because my experience in that has been for small businesses, the data center or the data corner or the data closet or data shelf, whatever it is in one part of the office, but where the cable company dropped in their tiny little cable box may be on the other side of the building. And the servers are all up and running, but the internet
The
connection
demarc is
went
down.
down
Yeah.
because it just had a little 9-volt box, plugged into the wall.
So
So you have to prove all that stuff out. You have to walk through those series.
so yeah, for those of you, that's our little quick lesson for the week before we get into stakeholder interviews.
Ah,
Is that come on, people, disaster recovery hit it hard this week.
yep.
Top of mind for every business owner out there. What can they do? Can you provide cheap solutions for your small customers? Can you provide reliable solutions for your big customers? Can you talk to them about generation and capacity? And those are big ones. So, can you help them understand how many watts and amperages they need to run independently of the grid for 40 hours, like Skip's saying?
Yep.
Like at my house, I have a generator. It's a 2000i. It's a fantastic little generator. The great thing about the 2000i's is they're Honda. You can pick them up with one hand, and they'll put out 2000 watts. That's enough to run a space heater, lights, and basics. If
Yep.
you buy a pair of them, they'll sister up. Now you have 4,000 watts, and you have something like 35 amps. And so, know these little things. These are little, like a 2000i costs you about $1,000. And that's run, that'll run your demarc. It'll run several switches, and it will keep a good kiosk up and running at um, a site for 8 hours straight on a gallon of gas. I mean, they're fantastic little generators. But if you can talk to your customers about that stuff, you can work on getting it in place. Even if you need an electrician to do the wiring for you, you don't even have to worry about that. You could have this generator sitting in a closet, knowing that, hey, you're going to be down for 2 hours. And if you call us, we will have somebody come and plug everything in to this generator, fire it up for you, and you will be able to run. So people know that they can come to your gas station and they will still be able to buy gas, buy groceries, whatever. So understand which customers are. And that's where your HIT infrastructure audit is going to come into place. You should, if you have audited all your customers, you should be able to look at the audits and say who is doing poorly on what did you categorize as those? Backup? No. Redundancies? What would that be under on HIT? Which subcategory is it?
I spread
I'm
that one
struggling off
out.
the top of my head.
Yeah, that's from a customer perspective. So it'd probably be on internet and connectivity.
So if they're scoring low there, to hit those customers up like, hey, would you like to invest $500 in redundant connections or backup power for your company? If you want to invest $10,000 in redundancies, build up a project, pitch it to them. And along that, while you're doing those projects, that brings us to stakeholder interviews. Skip and I's kind of one of our favorite things about dealing with customers is stakeholder interviews are from the top level. A stakeholder in an interview is a key stakeholder in the business. So your client has key stakeholders, and these are the people that are go-to. If somebody has a problem, they go to this person. They're the ones who run the finance. They're the ones who just know everything about the office. That's a key stakeholder. In fact, in insurance plans, there's something called a key man policy, where you can actually pull out a policy on somebody who's so critical to your business that if they got hit by a bus or got put out commission tomorrow, that the insurance policy will cover their role or their income. And so these people exist at companies, and they're very important. If you can identify them, they're also a gold mine for how to deal with your customer. It may not even be the owner.
Yeah, I think identifying these people is obviously, critical is kind of understatement, but this is the first step in this is you need to identify these people, and they can many times not be the person you would think. Just because someone is a VP of finance, it doesn't necessarily make them a key stakeholder.
Yeah.
I mean, that person could be in that role because they're really good at managing the team, but their finance whiz is just some guy over in the corner that they slide pizzas under the door every so often, and he's just the man with the finances. But he may not be able to run a team. So that's not his skill set, but his, what he does do for the company can literally be invaluable in terms of what the company does. So your first step is to, find these people out. And to do that, you need to go to the obvious ones. Start at the very top. Get the top stakeholder, the CEO, the owner, and start asking them, who are the critical people in this organization that we need to talk to? And I think your owners and your executive teams are really going to appreciate that question, all right, because they're going to know that you're zeroing in on what is important to them. So, don't just go by title. Definitely go and talk to the executive, the owner of the organization, and find out who it's most important. And there's another little trick here that comes from that. And if you can get it, and sometimes you kind of have to work it, around, but if you can get that CEO to send an email to those 3 or 4 stakeholders and say, hey, our service provider, our IT service provider is going to be following up with you to make sure they understand what our business does. Please give them an hour of your time. All right. And so that's kind of can help nail it down. But the good news about these case stakeholder interviews, every one that I've done, they have always been a little awkward to start. Okay. The person's like, why am I in this interview? What are you wanting to know? And it takes just a couple of minutes. But once that ball gets rolling, these meetings always just gush useful information.
Yes.
Once you get these people started talking about what's really important to them, sometimes they won't shut up. But that's all good information. So it's not something you have to ask a lot of questions on. You don't have to run a structured meeting. The hardest part's gonna be the first 5 minutes to explain what you're doing and get them talking. And after that, just try to keep up, and you will get a mountain of data out of them.
Yeah. So as an example today, if you have any questions, ask them in chat. As an example is today, you're going to go over and you're going to talk to a client about battery backups and redundancies at your client. So let's say that's a project you want to pitch to your client at the next quarterly meeting. It was identified as a gap, but now that we've seen the power outages, we know that it's top of mind and people are concerned about it. So before your QBR, take one of these stakeholders or three of them. I like three, the rule of threes, and schedule 15-minute phone calls with each one of them. These are busy people. You want to be very respectful of the time. Don't do the default hour thing.
No, schedule 15 minutes of their time, but schedule a whole hour of your time.
Yes.
Because I guarantee it's going to run long. Not because of you, because of them.
So saying you want a quick phone call, do a touch point with them and say, hey, how did you guys handle blah? Like, so talk about, in this case with the power thing, like, how did you guys deal with the power outages recently? Was that a big concern for you guys? We're checking with our customers. Can you please tell me what the biggest problem that came up because of these things? Can you please tell me any one thing that would have been helpful for you during this time, this downtime? Are there any issues that cause a disruption to business? And then finally, how can I personally help this go better next time? So you ask those 4 questions in context, then you get them rolling on this idea of, yeah, you know what? We run an ice cream store. We have one computer there and we were unable to do business because everybody was rolling in and trying to get their snack on the way home from work or whatever, or trying to take their kids out for ice cream because they're driving them crazy at home, and we couldn't do any sales. So if we could find some way to solve that, it'd be fantastic. And now you've got a client-driven project. So you've turned that QBR where you're going to come and say, hey, I would like to do all these things for you. Instead, you say, hey, I talked to Sally and she said that 3 of your stores couldn't even do sales because they had no capacity to run their kiosk systems. They didn't have a out of band method for charging customers. And so you do that and you bring that up with them and you say, hey, had you been down for another 24 hours, that refrigerator was going to spoil all your food and you're going to lose that much more money. Yeah. So we think, how do we help the technology in the environment? How do we do this? And so that your project then becomes more important because you've now gotten the input from that key stakeholder that flavors your conversation. So rather than just walking into your QBR with you need more battery backups, you need more power generation to stay in business, you now can say, well, we talked to Sally and it looks like you guys lost 2 days of revenue. Well, we think we can get this fixed for $3,000.
Yep.
And that's the project, or $10,000 project. We can make sure that your offices have connectivity going forward when there is a blizzard. We also know that this will help you during these other scenarios as well.
Now, one of the things you want to do is, like I said, these meetings are really easy to run, I think. They're harder in the first few minutes, but the rest of it goes really quick. But you do need to talk on a standard set of questions, okay? Adam's approach there, what didn't go well, what has been going well, following that process and break that down really good. Now, another one that I did just a few months ago was I used, some of you might have heard me talk about these, I call them my 2 Qs. Right? You ask them 2 questions. How does your company make money? What's your source of revenue, and what's the number 1 risk to that revenue? All right. So those are 2 really good questions, and I get a lot of really good feedback from CEOs when I ask that. All right, they like talking about that. So here's the interesting deal. So I was in an annual strategy session. I was able to ask the owner of the company the owners of the company. All right, they were both sitting down there, and asked them, how do you make money? What's the number one source of revenue and number one risk to that revenue? And I asked it twice. All right, so I did a pair of 2Qs. So your number one stream of revenue and number two stream of revenue. Okay, and so I had four data points there. And you can ask other things too. You can say, hey, well, if your number one source of revenue is this, what is one thing that would make that revenue stream happen easier or faster or more, whatever, and those are some little talking points you can get. But so anyway, I generated these four little data points, a pair of 2Qs. Then I turned around and we had this annual strategy session, but one of their key stakeholders wasn't able to be in that annual strategy session. All right, he was out on job site, couldn't make it. So I scheduled a key stakeholder interview with him in the next quarter. And I asked him the same series of questions. Now, interestingly enough, his responses didn't really line up with the CEO's view of how the company makes money and the risk to that revenue. So that was really good information. And it's not up to me to judge that, but it's really empowering for me to sit down with the CEO and go, hey, in our annual strategy session, we talked about this. Here's the 2Qs that I went over. Here's what your key stakeholders are saying. All right. And when you get in that, I mean, you're in the nitty gritty of their business and how things are operating. And that is going to position you as a valuable consultant. You don't have to provide any solutions here. You're not the answer man. You're just bringing things to the table.
To create an analogy here, it's the difference between a salesperson come up to you and say, hey, can I talk to you about pest control at your house? And a sales guy coming up and saying, hey, your wife scheduled this appointment with me and said you have some problems with mice in the basement.
Yeah.
The two different quals are, and that's not a referral. This is a pre-qualified. He didn't come up to me and say, you have pest control. He said, your wife, somebody I know, came up and told me specific problem, and I have a solution for it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, I better get this done. And so that's the difference between interviewing key stakeholders before your QBRs and not. Yes, you still are providing a valuable service. You're still good at your job. The pest control guy is still good at his job. But you know what? I don't need it right now. I don't really have a pest problem. Yeah. But knowing that my wife talked to this guy before I did and said, I want this, I have this mouse problem in my basement, and the pest guy's coming up to solve this problem that my wife has, I'm 99% sure I'm going to buy that service, unless he proves to be some kind of quack. So these 15-minute phone calls have another purpose to them, and the fact that they're a touch point. They're a moment for you to bond with another person at the company. Now, small businesses, your small clients, this is probably the same person as your main contact points, probably the owner as well. But as you get to the little bit larger companies, these key stakeholder ideas become more important because they become a quick little 10-minute, 15-minute phone call. And this person now knows you. They know your name. So when you come up in budgetary meetings, they're like, oh yeah, I really like Skip.
Yes. And
so that secondary creating depth of relationships with your customers, the key stakeholders, not necessarily the leaders, the key stakeholders are the ones who are going to be going, oh man, we can't get rid of Bob. He's good.
Right.
And he called me up and helped me out with an issue, and they're going to feel loyal to you. You're going to have that stickiness factor. So not only are you going to sell more projects that are more tuned into what your clients need, but you're also going to sell them. You're also going to maintain the relationship longer because you have a deeper relationship with more people at the organization. If you have a relationship with one person, it's easy for them to get mad at you and switch over to somebody who's cheaper or better.
So I've got a kind of a big giant shipwreck, in experience terms with me. And I was working with an organization and we lost a big customer. Long story short, it all came down to we had really just one point of contact with that person. And our relationship with that one person was really good. Invoices were getting paid, quotes were cycling through, everything was good, tickets were being handled. Communication was great. There were no red flags, but our point of contact wasn't the ultimate decision maker there. And somebody came in above the point of contact and stole the business away from us. And, if we had had a wider touch point within that organization, if we were, just like Adam was talking about, if we were engaged with more key stakeholders in that business, that business would not have been able to pivot so quickly to another provider, just simply because, I mean, and to be honest, the CEO of another MSP just wined and dined the CEO of this organization. I mean, we lost the business on the golf course. That is, the connection was made, and it was so easy to pivot because the CEO just had to make one phone call to one subordinate and say, "Hey, I've made a decision. We're switching to MSPs." Right? Done. But had that been spread out over key contacts throughout the organization, it wouldn't have happened that way. We could have lost the business. I'm not saying that's, this is an ironclad security against that, but it's definitely going to give you the opportunity to fight for that job, to keep that business in your wheelhouse. Like I said, we found out with the notice, the non-negotiable notice. It's like, hey, we're done. We've already started down the road over here. 10 days from now, we're switching over, please provide passwords. So it was a quick change. So beating a dead horse here, but those multiple contacts are really, really important in so many different areas. And I see this happen all the time. I mean, we get our point of contacts, we get the person that knows what's going on, and we just call them. I'll just call Sally or whoever, I'll just call them because they know what's going on. But when you become dependent on that, then that person is, here's your backwater term, that person's carrying your water, right? Water is really important down, I've been through the power outages, and now we're about to have the water outages, all right, down here in Houston. So anyway, water is really important. So don't trust somebody else to carry your water, right? So you want to be having those communications. Don't rely on people within an organization to be a pseudo employee of your organization, all right? Don't rely on them to carry the message, to make the convincing arguments, to fight for you as an organization. Get in there and develop those relationships yourself.
Yeah, and if you don't know what questions to ask, so you're sold on the idea that these stakeholder interviews are important, just follow my standard template. It's the SWOT or the lessons learned, where what's going well, what's not going well, and what can we do.
Yep.
Those three things. Just I don't want to create 1,000 different processes for people to follow. That's why we keep doing the same little things over and over again, so that when you're in the middle of an ad hoc conversation, you know what questions to ask.
Yes.
And it shows that I'm concerned. I want you to succeed, and I want to take action on things now. I don't want to just have rhetoric.
And as long as you don't put those questions in technical terms, don't ask what didn't go well with your computer systems. Okay. I mean, don't hem them in. Don't confine their responses to just technology. Open it up. And that's kind of how you set the expectation of these. Let them know that you're looking to make sure technology supports their business, whatever that is. And so you just need to understand that. And so set the expectations that, hey, you may tell me something that I really can't affect. If we're talking about heavy equipment manufacturing or repair services or something, there's maybe a significant component about that I can't really affect any, but I want to make sure I understand it, so that if there is some element that technology can support, I want to be on top of that. So that's kind of how you would set the expectations, but really open it up to whatever they're focused on. That way you have the opportunity to see that, because you don't want them saying, hey, I know I need a new firewall with a higher back bandwidth on the backplane. All right. They don't know what they need, right? They just need to express that. And then you'll be able to go, oh, if we installed a new firewall, that would fix that problem, So that's where you get to thrive in the technology arena, but open it up to all things business, all things important to them, and then you can pick out what you need to tackle with technology initiatives.
Yep. I think we've got people down on this, and we actually got a lot of people attending today. And so I really want to just impress upon you, like while you're doing, to sum up things here, to while you're doing these architecture audits, these infrastructure audits on all your clients, you should be doing 3 a week. And then while you're doing those, be thinking about, have I done any kind of stakeholder interviews with these guys? Should I? You know, if they're an A or B client, yeah, probably. You should be doing like a little 15-minute phone call. Doesn't have to be on site, doesn't even have to be Zoom. Just pick up the phone and have a phone call. If you, a best practice is, like as Skip said, if your CEO or whoever your point of contact is can give them a heads up saying, hey, Adam's going to call you guys or set up some time to talk you through about what's going on with our company. And it's your chance to voice your opinion on things we can do better. You know, get those heads up. But while you're doing your infrastructure audits, be thinking top of your head, like, oh, here are things that I want to be doing with this client. So that when you do the stakeholder interview, you come primed with some ideas, but don't start off your interview with those ideas. Just create a context that you're going to be working within and say, hey, first ask them about themselves, ask them what they think is important. And then at the end, say, how do you think this would help you? If you have a really good project you think's really going to help them and you have primed and ready to go, that last 5 minute of the conversation can be like, do you really think that backups would be healthy for your organization or for your branches? And then you get some context and take those notes. Usually when I do key stakeholder interviews, I'm writing down the biggest problems and I'll do like 3 or 4 of them and I'll see if there's any commonalities between my stakeholder interviews and those become my projects. And so if you have a project already, use that for the last part of the conversation saying, hey, what do you think about this? And then if you don't have any projects, just sit back and listen and write down what they're telling you they need. And then you can come up with solutions. So your QBR, you say, hey, 3 weeks ago, I talked to Alice. She said that this was a problem. We came up with a solution. If you guys are ready, we can roll this out in March and we're ready to go.
Yep.
You'll have a really good stickiness factor. You'll have a really good relationship and you'll be ready to go. So key stakeholder interviews plus audits equals big projects that are slam dunks.
That's it.
And that's about it for today. Everybody needs to go watch the Perseverance landing, which happens in like 20 minutes. Is that launching from your area?
What's that now?
Is that managed from Houston?
Oh yes, down in Space City, Johnson City.
So yeah, that lands in 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So hit up your YouTube channels, pop it on. So use the rest of this meeting time that you have scheduled out to watch some history happening. So thank you all for coming and we'll see you next week.
See you.